And we're live. Welcome to Earful of Dirt Lineouts. And today, in the awesomeness that is NOLA Gold Rugby, they've continued to produce officials, and eventually they will produce players to come on the Lineouts podcast. So, as always, Lineouts isn't just MLR stuff. It's where we do interesting things, but we also want to hear specifically from, coaches, staff, and players involved with MLR. So, former Metropolis head coach, now NOLA Gold head coach, Nathan Osborne is here with us today. How are you doing?
I'm good, mate. How are you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Pretty well. Thank you for coming on. So I'm doing great. It's a rugby day, so
yeah.
Every day's a rugby day. Sometimes people don't understand that.
That's the dream. That's the dream for sure. Do rugby all the time.
So you're from Australia. Which part? I think you went to high school in Canberra?
I did.
Is that right?
Yeah, so I grew up in a little country town called Queanbeyan, which is about half an hour out of Canberra. So yeah, that's where I ended up going to high school and played a fair chunk of rugby in Canberra as well.
Nice. When did you start playing rugby?
I started when I was 5. I started playing rugby league. My dad was a rugby league star back in the day and a rugby league coach. So me and my brother started playing when we were 5, playing league. And then once I went to school at St. Edmunds College, which was a big rugby union school in Australia, that's when I started. About 12, I started playing both until I was about 17. And then just straight rugby from there. Haven't played league since. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So sometimes people refer to league as 13-a-side, and I get really confused.
Yeah.
Because league is different.
League's
and
different.
I just remember, it's like, 15s. I was like, I've never heard of 13s. I was like, who plays 13s? I know 5s from the beach.
Yep.
And 10s. And apparently there's a tournament for the London 9s. I have no idea what that's about, but I think just code out there.
Right.
So, but it's a union code, whereas league is, I guess people refer to 13s. It's not union. It's significantly different.
It is. Yeah, it's a different game. It was great playing both growing up. Like I said, from the age of 12 to 17, I played both. So we'd train Monday, Wednesdays union, Tuesday, Thursday league, play union Saturday, league Sunday. So that was, brutal for a young kid, but in terms of developing rugby across the board, in terms of leagues very much built on defense, union's very much built on attack. So it was really good to have both, a really good mixture of both those growing up and going through. So I really enjoyed both. But once I got to school and played in the first 15, played for the Australian schoolboys, I realised that union was going to be the path for me to, further my rugby. So that's why I just started playing rugby union after that, full on.
And then you played professionally. Since the beginnings of rugby union professionally are hard to find. I couldn't find that.
Yeah,
it's more so because just records on the internet for what seems outside the United States just sometimes aren't computed into Wikipedia or ESPN Scrum, so you can't find certain things.
Yeah. So 99. So I finished school in 98. Played Aussie schools, went on a big tour, came back, moved to Sydney and played for Randwick.
Okay.
And so I played for Randwick and was part of the Waratahs Academy then as well. Played Waratahs U20s back then. And then from there, I moved to Southern Districts for a couple of years. And that was a professional time. Again, early in rugby, only became professional in 96. So this was really early days. So, and then went home back to Canberra after that and joined up with the Brumbies training squads and played a lot of B-side for the Brumbies. So the runners, they call it. Never had any Super Rugby caps, which is, always a disappointing thing for a young man. But at the same time, when you look at the Brumbies teams of those days, with the Larkhams and the Gregans and the Morlocks and all the great rugby players that were playing it. It's understandable, you know. So yeah, and then played in the local comp there for a few years. Played for East, which is the local club down there. And back then we were still getting paid to do that. It was a little like I equivocate it to a little bit like the MLR. You know, you're not making a ton of money, but you're making enough to train every day and work on your game. And I was a personal trainer as well, so I'd work nights as a personal trainer and train during the day, train rugby, and that's kind of how it all went. And I thought back then the competition in Canberra was so good. The Brumbies did something that was new to Australian rugby. They were trying to bridge a gap, and so they said, okay, every player that is with the Brumbies has to play for a local team as well. So you, in any given week, you're playing with and against Wallabies and Brumbies, and the local competition of 7 teams became so really, really strong. And for a while, I think it was the best competition in Australia for a long time until Sydney got their act together again and picked their game up again. And Sydney's competition is probably a little better now. But back in the early 2000s, the Canberra competition, and that's why the Brumbies were so successful. They had so many local guys coming through, and basically they had 7 feeder clubs underneath them that were just feeding guys in. So, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that's something really hard to picture here in the States because it's just,
yeah.
I mean, in the 90s, like during the Super League, you know, guys they could say they weren't getting money, but people were getting money. I mean, not a lot. We're talking like $200, $200 or $300 late 90s, and you know, more or less match fees and then job placement, right?
Right.
And you still for some teams they still do. There's still job placement because your networks are so good, and that's how you build good amateur rugby teams because you know you just. Hey, the guy has a college degree and he's an accountant. Right. There's a firm right over there, so get him a job, you know.
Sure.
But then so you met your wife in the States or
I did
in Australia?
No, in the States. I came here to actually play for the Denver Barbarians in the Super League in 2006, and just had a 3-month visa to come over and play a season. 2 weeks into that stay, I met my wife and never went home, much to the disappointment of my mum. I just stayed and just said, all right, let's give this a crack, and I'll stay here with you. And we ended up getting married about 6 months later. And then when she was pregnant with our first daughter, Ella, she's from Minnesota, so we moved back to Minnesota in late 2007. I've been here ever since. Yeah.
I mean, some very big similarities with you and the Rook Windsors, Sam down in Houston, because he's he's Australian. Went and played for Ulster and
Queanbeyan boy, same town as me, same little country town as me. He grew up in.
Nice. So. I didn't know. Nice. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. So you have you have 2 guys, good bit, difference in age, but you both met American women.
Yep.
And that's how you got here. So that's awesome.
Yeah. It's cool. I mean, like I said, same town. He was born and bred in just outside of Queanbeyan, Bungendore, which is same town. And then both went to St. Edmunds. He went to St. Edmunds as well. He stayed in Canberra and played, same sort of thing with the Brumbies runners and a bunch of that stuff as well. So pretty similar, just he's a lot younger, which I'd like to be, but he and he's a good player. He's a very good player.
Yeah. I actually had the opportunity to watch Houston practice about a week ago. Okay, and nice. I mean, I've said to some other people that I think that, as the league expands, because he's older than me. I feel old. And then I see some of the kids that the MLR that you guys are signing to play in the MLR, it makes me feel really old.
Right.
And but I just saw the way he ran drills with the backs.
Yeah.
And just the way the time wasn't wasted. I think he's going to be, I think he's eventually going to be a much better coach than, he was as a player. And, those things are hard to do. Like,
yeah,
a lot of players don't want to coach at all. They want to play as long as possible.
Yep.
And they don't want to learn like that extra aspect going forward. You see it in the club game a lot
Right.
because, I think in the United States we have it's very difficult for us to transition players to being administrators, coaches, and officials.
Sure.
And that's probably I don't picture is, but I've seen the small picture from now playing in 3 clubs. And then there's like clubs with very strong club cultures, like community aspects. I think they have the advantages, and I can't really put my finger on the pulse and what makes them different other than, if I played at that club, I'd want to play for them, and I'd want to hang out with those guys. Whereas I've played with clubs that are basically just teams, and I don't want to hang out with any of those people. I don't want to do anything with those people. So, but those clubs that have that kind of culture, their players become coaches, officials, and presidents that grow the game. And I think culturally in the United States we're missing something.
Sure.
Because you have most clubs, at least from what I can tell, in the UK and Ireland and a bit in New Zealand and now in parts of Australia, because it's not like this in every part of Australia, that there are those huge cultures built up, but that culture also takes decades to build.
Yeah.
So if you don't have adult decision makers 20 years ago making those decisions, you're just you're behind.
Yep. And mate, yeah, that's 100% right. And I think when you look at Metropolis and the success Metropolis has had over the last 6 to 7 years, it's all built around culture and all built around everyone's just best friends there. Like we have group text messages and Snapchats, and I guarantee when I check my phone again after this, there'll be 20 messages from guys just sending stupid stuff to each other. And I think it goes 2 ways when you do that. You want to work harder for your mates. You don't want to let your mates down. And also on the back end of that, it's easier to take criticism from your mates and someone that cares about you. So if you're getting told to push harder in the scrum, or you're getting told, hey, don't drop another ball, if it's coming from a mate, it means you're more likely not to want to do it again. If it comes from a bloke that you don't know or don't respect, then it becomes very hard to do those things, I think. So that's I think the main reason why Metropolis is been so successful over that period of time.
You said you moved to Minnesota up in like 2007, 2008, right?
Yeah, 2007. Yeah. Late 2007.
Okay. I noticed based on my research, you were playing and you were a player coach with their Division III side when they won the national title in 2011.
I was, yeah. That was my first. So we had twin girls after the first one, and I had to step back from rugby a bit. So I decided that the D3 team plays locally. I don't have to travel. Like Midwest is brutal travel. Like the closest game to us is Chicago, which is a 6.5-hour drive. So and it goes anywhere up to 16 hours to Columbus and Cincinnati. So to take away that travel, it was my first year as coach, and I said, all right, I'm going to be a player coach. I'm going to learn as much as I can doing this. And we had a great run. We won the national title, which was awesome. It was a great team we had then.
So when did you become the Division I head coach?
The year after that, 2012.
Oh.
Yeah. So I stepped into, after that year, it was, I really enjoyed coaching. The boys really enjoyed having me as the coach. So I took over as the full club coach then.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Metropolis currently fields 2 men's sides. Is that correct?
Three.
Okay. So Division I, Division II, and Division III.
Division 4, but yeah.
Okay. Oh, Division 4.
Yeah. So 1, 2, 4.
Got it. So regional competition only is what I understand.
Yep.
Division 4 rugby. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But so over the period of time looking into Metropolis, you guys are, extremely competitive in the Midwest Premiership this year. What you guys have built there shows sustained success.
Yep.
And because, even though you've taken a new job and are focusing on building that, how much have you helped out this fall? Or are you still coaching with them?
No, I'm not still coaching. I've got so much stuff going on that I couldn't do it anymore. I help when I need to, but the guys that they got, like Rob Holder's great, and the other coach is Ash Horban, who's still around. He was with me the whole time as my forwards coach. He stayed. Charlie Boulevardra stayed on as well. So all the other coaches stayed, and then Rob, who actually was the owner of Spearhead Rugby Academy, he took over head coach there and helps them out. So yeah, they've been great, mate. And we won 5 of the 7 Midwest championships, or 5 of the 6 actually, I think it was, and then made 2 Final Fours and 2 Final Eights in the nation. So it was for a club that had never really made the playoffs to have instant success. And then a lot of teams, they get to that level, and then with player retirements and all that sort of stuff, they just drop off. Where we really made an effort to build through our Division 4 into 2, into 1, and let these young guys come through. And they're seeing the benefits of it this year for sure. They've been great this year.
Yeah,
a lot of young guys.
Something in the club game, I look at it, you don't see a lot of, I would say super clubs, and you've seen the Division 1 clubs starting to disappear. I think this year there's 45, 46. And last year they were in the 60s.
Yeah.
And, I think, because when I think of a Division 1 club, what that should be is, you should have a Division 2, a Division 3, and then, this is where we talk about culture, multiple youth sides going on, and even, women and girls, all girls teams and whatnot, because that's the community club. And then you have some Division 1 clubs out there that only have a Division 1 team.
Right.
And there's 30 dudes. And if something happens, the next year they get crushed.
Right.
So you only, what was it? There was one year, it was so was it in 16? I was playing on the Fort Bliss Warriors, and we did pretty well for a 2-year-old club, because that Army teams are all, it's really hard to get a beat on them. Sometimes, you'll have 50 guys in the club, and then the next year, there will be 20, or you have 50 guys in the club, but you only have 20 guys to go to the match because your schedules are all whacked out.
Right.
And that was really good culture. I love that club. It was just schedules are kind of hard to do in the Army, much like in regular life, but you miss things. And 1 year, because people PCS, just in the regular club game, you can have a good run for 3 years, but I think a lot of clubs don't recruit, don't think about recruiting. Right. Especially in places like Arizona, because you have 3 division now D1A colleges. But if you talk to some of the college coaches, they don't really the clubs really don't go to the games to recruit players, and they don't talk with the collegiate coaches, which is we have a big retention issue going from high school to club to college club, and then from college club to seniors. And I don't really know, other than just people don't talk.
Sure.
So, and
that's definitely something that Metropolis has done right. There's Minnesota Duluth, we've got a lot of kids that come down from there, and they won 3 national championships in a row there, or pretty close. St. John's. So the U of M, there's a lot of good colleges around. There's a really strong high school program as well at a lot of schools. So a lot of the coaches that coach in those areas are either old Metropolis guys or guys that are going back to give back to their school. And it's something we really encourage. And we really wanted to make our club, and the president, Adam Dilley, did a great job of this, of making it a club for everybody. So it doesn't matter if you've never played rugby before. It doesn't matter if you're an Eagle that's coming to the team. There's a spot on this club for you, and you're going to be treated exactly the same way. You're going to get the same coaching. You're going to get the same game plans. You're going to get the same attention as everybody across the board. And I think it really blossomed and grew the club to where it is now.
So you were an attack and backs coach on Mike Tolkien's 2015 World Cup staff. What was that buildup like?
It was great. I actually really enjoyed my time there with the Eagles. I thought the players were great. They worked really hard. And I thought the coaches were great too. I learned a lot. And I thought it was, it's everyone's dream to go to a World Cup, whether it's as a player or as a coach. And so it was really a dream come true that you could get to go to a World Cup and be on a staff that, has input into how we're going to play and that sort of stuff. And I loved my time with them, and I thought it was great. Everything was good about the Eagles job. I liked it a lot.
Compared to, I don't really know what Eddie had, but as far as resources are concerned, I don't recall. But during that period of time, did you guys assemble the squad outside of Windows, so that, because I see a lot of what Eddie Jones gets to do, and maybe that's just them, and maybe it's tier 1. But did you? Right. They have multiple mini camps.
Yep, we did. We got to have. There was a straight forwards camp where the forwards went and did a lot of scrumming and line out and stuff like that. And then we took a fully domestic team. So none of the pros came to that. And we went down to Uruguay, and we played Uruguay and Argentina a couple times each. That was a 2-week trip where we got to see a lot of the domestic guys and work with the domestic guys, and then watch them play and stuff like that. So that was something that we did. And then we had the ARC build up where we played against Samoa, Tonga, Canada, and Japan. And that was another chance to get a lot of guys that were fringe or the not amateur guys some time in camp with us as well. So we spent a fair bit of time with those guys.
Awesome. So do you think, since I think a lot of those tournaments during that time were really, as far as World Rugby was concerned, they were like A-side tournaments?
Yep.
What do you think about, the ARC and what it has done for the Eagles and just America's rugby in general?
Yeah, I love the concept of ARC. I love the concept that guys that are working full time and training twice a week, which is all that really is allowed, or all that your time you get really allow in club rugby, to go and concentrate on rugby for a few weeks, hear a different voice, work on their game and play a higher level of rugby. I think that's always beneficial for everybody. So I think it's been great in terms of developing guys, and you get guys that come back from those trips, even guys that come back to Metropolis from those trips, and they just have a new lease on life of what they want to do as a player, and it gives them that little bit of a taste of what it's like to be a pro. So I think that the MLR is going to offer that on a weekly basis, which I think is going to be really beneficial for those guys. But I think in terms of those tournaments for non-pro guys that live in America, I think you have to do it. I think it's great.
Going a little bit back to Metropolis, you were also an assistant with the Valkyries.
Yep.
What would you say is different coaching, women at a high level and men at a high level, or is it the same? Or should it be the same?
It should be the same. It's pretty similar. It's not that. The thing that I'll say about the girls is they're like sponges. They want to know every little bit of information that they can get out of you, where the boys just want outcome. So you can tell somebody, hey, you need to do this, 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 and this, and then this will happen. And the girls will want to do it that way, where the boys are like, well, I just want this to happen. So I think I learn a lot coaching with them in terms of how hard they work and how dedicated they are to rugby, and just how much they take in and how much they want to learn and how many questions they ask compared to the boys, which I think is a great thing.
Awesome. And going into how you got picked up, well before, I guess, with NOLA Gold, there was, I would call it a rumor.
Yeah.
As far as a 7th team originally in Minneapolis, were you approached to stay there? And now that the rumor is that there's no Minneapolis team and it's going to be in San Diego.
I talked to the Minneapolis team, and I don't know what their plans are now. Once I signed with NOLA, they didn't want to talk to me anymore about it, which is fair. So I'm not sure what their plans are, whether they're going to be in San Diego, whether they're going to be here. I mean, hopefully they're here. I'd love to see a team in Minneapolis. Just as you did last week talking to Ryan, you feel that passion and that drive that he has and Todd has and Tim has. And it's really hard to not buy into what they're trying to build down there. And for me, it was one of those things of, I think more than anything, going away and doing it without being in the comfort of my own little bubble in Minneapolis, I think was a big selling point to me. Trying something different, trying a new city, getting a say to build a club from the ground up was a huge part of it as well, with players and how we're going to do things and how we're going to run things was a big selling point to me compared to kind of what was on the table from the Minneapolis franchise. So I think that's more the reason than anything. It wasn't anything to do with anything other than I just really bought into what they wanted to do, and it made me excited to go down there and help them do what they're going to do. So.
Oh, I thought it was you didn't have to shovel snow for 4 months out of the year.
Mate, that's a big part of it too. It snowed the first time today, and I'm not happy about it. I don't like it one bit. My wife dreads when winter's coming because I start to get a little antsy. So living in a sunny place year round will be a lot more beneficial for me, and my family will enjoy it too. They're going to come too, so they'll enjoy it too.
That'll be a good time. So one of the things that when I talk to Ryan, and when I've read when he's gone on tape and also on paper and talking about this philosophy, I think it was a Rugby World Cup article. I think it was titled "To America with Love" 10 years ago. "To America with Love" or something.
Yeah,
and it was about you, and it was like the last paragraph was about crossover. I would say crossover athletes.
Sure.
And recruiting. I call them choice. I say choice athletes. So first choice athletes, guys who, are going to play Division I level sports,
right,
on scholarship, and recruiting those types of athletes, because there's only so many scholarship spots on a basketball team, on a baseball team,
yep,
not even scholarship spots. There's only so many roster spots on a Division I collegiate team. And then you go to the next level, there's only so many, contracts per year, basketball, football, of course, only you have the Arena League, you have the CFL a bit, but even the CFL, it's not majority Americans. It's majority of, guys playing, Canadian football their entire lives, and, standouts who just don't necessarily make it here.
Yep.
They get a shot, and if they're really good, they come back, as we've seen throughout, the history. But so when it comes to recruiting, I think you guys in the article talked about hockey players because,
Sure.
I mean,
those big hockey players,
like 6'4" Viking type guys
yeah,
on the ice.
yeah.
I mean, there's probably flankers and 8-men, falling off trees
Sure.
in Minnesota.
Yeah, and the thing that I think about hockey players and football players can definitely do it, as we've seen. Metropolis got a couple football guys now that are great. They're outstanding. Melvin D'Souza was a running back at North Dakota. He's in his second year of rugby, and he's the leading try scorer the last 2 years in the Midwest. Joel Youngest was another like fullback who came out. He had a trial with Miami Dolphins, ended up playing rugby and was great. But the thing I find about hockey players and even basketball players to an extent is they understand space. They understand what a 2-on-1 means. They understand if there's two guys standing in front of me, there's going to be space somewhere if I distribute the ball. Where football players, you've got to get that mentality out of them that they've got to take as many yards as they can before they get tackled. So I think that in terms of crossover athletes, I mean, it doesn't get much tougher than ice hockey. And they're tough kids and they're aggressive and they understand what it takes to be, find space and look for space and look for that stuff. So it's a little easy transition, I think, for those guys as well.
One of my favorite, now I wouldn't call her a crossover now at this point. She's been playing rugby for like 3.5, 4 years now is Kelter.
Yeah.
I mean, she's like her story is just wild to me. I was like, how do you go from, captaining, the U20 team to a world championship and not to like, just to be on just be on the Olympic team. I don't know how that happens, but she was, Kelter, like she was a Division I hockey and soccer player. Like you don't, those kinds of athletes just don't, like that's an elite athlete. They don't really exist like out there. And the fact that you could get one to go play, women's rugby, there's going to be like that one.
Yeah.
In men's rugby that you can, create the face of your team eventually. Cause it's just a great story and it's easy to sell. Yeah. Cause people eat that kind of story up.
Yeah, she's outstanding, mate. She's very, very good, and she's great, and that's the perfect example there of a hockey player that's so tough, but understands what it's like to play in space and fast, can kick. She can do everything within 2-3 years of playing rugby. So there's definitely opportunities for guys. I'm not saying that that everyone's going to make it, but there's definitely people out there that you've seen, that I've seen, that could definitely give it a fair shake, especially in an environment like a MLR academy or system where they can train pretty much every day on the basics and pick that up a lot faster than Tuesday, Thursday play a game, so.
Yeah, I mean, this year we're seeing, especially if everyone follows Glendale, we're seeing, a team that isn't practicing yet.
Yeah.
At what you guys I think will put in total hours starting in January, which I think is you're gonna have a bunch of full-time guys and you're gonna have a bunch of part-time players, but you're gonna I think as a squad, based on just my math, based on seeing Houston right now, is putting in about 25 hours a week,
right? As
a full 35-man training squad. And I know Glendale for a fact isn't training that much. But they're still in a focused strength and conditioning environment early in the morning. And then they're, practicing around 3 to 4 times a week in the evening, at a high level. And they're just beginning of the season. I think they've transitioned some players out to get ready for Autumn Internationals and to just push towards, the full launch of the Raptors side. It's like you're seeing the dramatic difference between, one team that practices 2 days a week, especially, so they've played All Blue twice, right?
Right.
Old Blue, they both have about, I think they both had, so Glendale has 8 capped guys in their system and Old Blue has 6. And we saw, at least the home game, the tremendous disparity between the two.
Yeah, I watched that game. It was big. Yeah, but even when you look at guys that they've got that have been around there for a couple of years, like Will and those guys, they're so much bigger and stronger and better in contact than they were when they first turned up. So I think you're right, like a training environment where they get to lift every morning together. Even though they're doing 3 sessions afternoon or late night sessions a week, plus film sessions and stuff like that, it's still a huge jump from what the average club is doing. And I think when you get to the MLR level and you have a chance to work with these guys even more than that, then the sky's the limit in terms of the quality that's going to be on the field.
Because, I mean, for me, the question that we got a long time ago, and the question, I think the question has been stopped coming out because I'm probably the most cynical guy on the podcast and the most skeptical, but I've seen what Glendale has done. I've gone down to practice at Houston, and as far as the quality of the game that you guys are going to put out there, I think it's going to be fantastic. And I think it's going to be well past I would say the end of the previous professional league that we had.
Sure.
By mid-season, quality-wise, because those coaching staffs were great, but they barely had time to assemble their teams up front. I think San Diego had the longest camp because they had a bye up front.
Yeah.
So they were in camp for 5 weeks.
Sure.
And you guys assemble in January. And like the kickoff for this thing for the whole league is in January, and that's when your 2025 maybe even depending on the week 30 hours of time is invested into strength and rugby and film.
Right. And
the quality of like I said, the quality of practice that I saw with Justin Fitzpatrick is I was really impressed.
Good.
And, people keep saying, hey, so how good is it going to be? I think it's going to be very good.
Yeah.
I think you guys are going to put something – I think it's going to capture what we want to capture.
Yeah. And I think the great thing about this league is that every team agrees with that, and every team is pushing really hard to make that happen. You don't want to be left behind, especially in the first year. I mean, you got one chance to make an impression, and that first year needs to be, really good quality matches, no blowouts. You want to make sure that there's progression in each game as well, I think. So you're getting better and better with each week, so the players have that progression as well. So I think, every time I talk to the league or anytime I talk to any of the other coaches, which I do, then everyone's on the same page that we're trying to build the best thing that we can build. Each team's kind of helping each other out to make sure that this league's going to be great.
So getting into specific coaching, what is your style? Because we see, at least with Mitch, we saw a wide open Southern Hemisphere style of play, and I've seen the way Glendale has played, and I've seen the talent assembled in Houston. I think we're going to play like heavy up front, but dynamic in both the pack and in the back line.
Yeah.
So not Gatlin ball.
Sure. Right. Good. That's good. Well, the fans. I mean, my favorite thing about rugby, and this is something that's gone back ever since I was in change rooms with my dad and listening to my dad talk and to other coaches and stuff like that. And something that my dad would talk about was that everybody has an idea of how to play rugby. Like you have an idea how you want to play rugby. I have an idea how we want to play rugby. Fitzy has one. Davey Williams has one. Mitch has one. They're all different, which is great. If everyone was the same, then it'd be boring and you wouldn't want to watch it. So in terms of my style, is that I'm a kind of a mixture. I think that if you're not really really physical and you don't win the middle of the field, so if your forwards don't get over the game line, then there's no point having a wide game, right? So we're going to really concentrate on being really physical at the contact point so that we can create fast ball, and we will play a more I'd say Southern Hemisphere kind of rugby, a more open style of rugby, which gives our playmakers plenty of options and plenty of decisions to make, and guys, running into space and then making the decisions. So I think the biggest thing for us early is to make sure that we take control of that contact point and take control of that physicality up the middle. If we don't win that, then there's not much you can do off the back of that. Set piece as well. I mean, I'm big in terms of our attacking platforms off set piece. If our scrum and line out aren't solid, and we take those away, then that makes it really hard for our backs to get over the game line and create anything. I think the biggest difference between the way that I like to play and other people like to play is I like to manipulate the defenses so that our playmakers make all the calls. And we have two on a field at a time, and they basically can sit back and they can kind of manipulate defenses. And you'll see it when we play, and you'll kind of understand what I'm talking about in terms of that they get to really dictate what we're doing with the ball all the time. It's our ball. We know where it's going, so we should never really turn it over. We should have plenty of people at the breakdowns. Everyone should know exactly where we want to go at every minute of the game. But I also like to be like more hands off and let those guys run the show. I'm not going to sit in the stands and have a megaphone and call out plays from the sideline. Like, they've got to see what we're doing and understand what our system entails and work within the frames of our system. But in terms of free reign, they have free reign to do whatever they see in terms of the play calling and stuff like that.
When it comes to plays, I think that's something that is really different from, like, originally I was a football player way back in the day, another life, and now I'm a rugby player. And I was talking to a friend of mine before who was at the captain's run ahead of San Diego, the San Diego test this last summer, and talked about what Mitch did different compared to other people who he observed in the international game compared to previous head coaches, like multiple guys. And he's like, well, the captain's run for Mitch just finds the highest point to observe. So he's just far away.
Yeah.
And he'll talk Todd ran the practice. And that made me think about the game in general. Football is very coach centric. You do have a lot of decisions based on routes and options based on defense, but they're not fluid. Based on play call, unless you're running, a no huddle offense the entire time and you're just going like that. But rugby is very, I say player centric and player control.
Yep.
Once you hit the game, coaches are sort of out of the equation, because it's very it's a fluid motion sport, which is what football is not. It's a reset sport for every play. So how would you communicate that to, because we do have coaches in rugby who are not player centric.
Sure.
And it sounds like you're a player centric guy.
Very much so. One of the things that I like to do, and one of the things I will do, is I'll get to know each and every one of those players personally, how they work inside and out, their families, everything about them. Everyone learns differently, as you know. Some guys like to be yelled at. Some guys like to be told how it is. Some guys like to be one-on-one meeting with a cuddle and, hey, you can do better, and that's part of it, so the first thing for me is to get to know each and every one of these guys and how they tick. And then there'll be a framework and there'll be a menu of everything that we've got in our arsenal and what we want to do. And then from there, the playmakers will completely take over. Starting Thursday in our, we'll have a breakdown and I'll say, okay, this is how we're going to beat this team. This is where they're weak. This is where they're strong. This is what we're trying to do. Here's our menu. This is what I want to see this week. We don't have to have 1,000 plays. These are the ones that I want to, work on this week. This is all the stuff. And then it's completely on them to, I can't come out of the stands and make tackles for them. I can't come out of the stands and all of a sudden grab the ball and pass it to the space that I see. My job is I can get messages out there and I can say, hey, did you notice that space? Or, hey, they're really folding around the corner fast. Have you thought about this? But in terms of they're running the show, 100% they're running the show. That's their time is that. And my job is to make sure that they're ready to do that. And my job is to make sure that we fix the things that we don't so that they don't happen again. That's the main thing that I think as a coach that you need to do. Set the practice plan, make sure that everyone understands exactly what we're trying to do, how we want to play, how we want to beat the team. Then it's over to the players.
So over time, what's your opinion on – I asked this question of every person I've talked to in MLR is one thing we're missing in American rugby is technical coaches for almost every position.
Yep.
What's your opinion on the use of player coaches? Or, I think I see it with the staff that Hodges has selected for the interim staff. There's, there's 4 guys.
Yep. Which
I think under Mitch previously, and I think other than the World Cup year, Mike only had 2 assistants.
Yep.
What's your idea of using player coaches and then progressing past, year 1?
Yeah.
And part of the problem is training technical coaches that are domestically available.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me with that is that I think it's very hard to be a player coach. I've done it myself, even at D3 and D1 level. It's really hard. You take on the responsibility of everybody around you. You don't just take on your own responsibility. You don't just play your game. You're playing for everybody. So I think although the first year, getting guys like Rook and Matty Truville and those guys, and we got Hubert Biden's coming down that's going to help us with our scrums and stuff like that. I think it's great that those guys that are kind of at the back end of their career can do that. And then hopefully they transition into just being coaches, which would be great for everybody if that was the case. But I think that in terms of having a lot of player coaches or having a head coach as a player coach, it's, I'd say, almost impossible to do at this level. If you want to get to where you want to be as a league, you don't look around the world and see player coaches in Super Rugby or player coaches in the Premiership. I think as a startup, it's completely fine because these guys that they're bringing in, you've talked about Rook and potentially he's skyrocketing as a coach from what you've seen. To give him that experience at the back end of his career is great, but I don't think that it's going to last long if everybody's just getting player coaches that are, worrying about everything else as well as what they're trying to do. It also makes it really hard if you want to drop a guy. If all of a sudden their form's not as good as the young guy that's coming up, and you have to say, hey, I know you're a coach, but you're on the sideline now. That's when you're picking player coaches and stuff like that, they've got to be out and out the best players so people listen. Because if all of a sudden you're trying to teach someone that's better than you and thinks that you should have their spot, that infighting and that stuff that happens in clubs, that culture that shifts, is a big deal in my opinion. So
yeah, that's definitely been an issue in the first 2 clubs I was in. The first club, I think the guy who was doing it just didn't know how to manage. Whereas sometimes the second club I was in, great coaches in practice, but when games would get tight, they couldn't manage 23. They could only manage. They could only be the captain on the field. They couldn't be the coach and said, "Hey, that wing is tired as heck. He's hitting the sideline. I'm replacing 2 props. Figure it out."
Sure. Yep.
You know, and that's my big thing with clubs is like even in club rugby, guys on the field, they're only worried about 15.
Yeah.
The captain's only worried about 15. He's not worried about managing minutes because for the most part, club rugby, no one has 80-minute fitness.
Right.
That's why there's 8 subs.
Right.
I mean, like there's 80-minute fitness in, professional rugby, and there's going to be 80-minute fitness in, in this league. But even guys with that kind of conditioning, sometimes they have a bad day and they need to sit for 20 minutes, Hooker needs to change, prop needs to change, fly half needs to change because there's just something's, we have an open system for our bodies, and so things just, they move around and you get sick or you're not thinking straight. And then, an hour later, you're like, oh, I was wrong. And you lost the game. So,
yeah. No, I mean, that's a great point. And I think that when you're at the club level, especially when you're a captain coach, you're not really as in tuned to the game like you're talking about as you are from watching it from a sideline and watching what everyone's doing. You're really worried about your job. If you're a front row and you're a captain coach and you're pushing in the scrum all the time, and then you look up and the ball's dropped, you don't really know who's done it. You don't know what's happening, why we're losing ground, all that stuff. But you also don't know what's happening with guys in their personal lives as well. If all of a sudden there's a guy that's having a bad day that doesn't usually have a bad day and you need to get him off, you can look back and say, well, he's up all night with his sick kid, or he had a massive fight with his wife this morning because he's playing rugby again. All those things play into the mental psyche of what you're trying to do. So I think that as from being a player coach, I think it's very, very hard to be a player coach, in my opinion. And it's not that you can't do it, but I think at this level, it's going to be nearly impossible for someone to be like a head coach or a long-term player coach.
Got it. That's where I want. That's the kind of like answer I want to hear for progression. And I think everyone I've asked that question of, it's like, well, we sort of need it, first 2 or 3 years maybe, and hopefully, things are set by year 4. Because I look at year 4 as the line of demarcation for me, because year 5 is like businesses do 5-year plans, 10-year plans. And year 5 is when I think, we're looking at a fully commercially viable enterprise based on the amount of business people involved. Like everyone that I've met that, is an owner or spoken to that is an owner, like, yes, this is a startup, but this is a commercial enterprise, and they want it to be self-sustaining. Whereas if you look at Aviva and you look at the union-owned competitions in Europe and even in the Southern Hemisphere, they're not really run like businesses, and they aren't necessarily sustaining themselves.
Right.
So I think by year 4, we have, guys, I hope, getting ready to hang up the boots on player coach and, just transitioning to be coaches. And, we've recruited the talent and the wages are stable. Because I know, because people ask like, well, what about this? What about that? And well, I got the note based on my idea was, hey, if it's single A money, talking baseball, if it's single A baseball money, that's enough to get a guy for 4 years. Because I've seen it. Like I've had, baseball player roommates in college, like they chased the ball. They chased that ball for 4 years on that money. And, their parents didn't have money, and they just, because the chance to make it big was there. And so they, not really put their life on hold for 4 years, but, lived loose and lived fast.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. I totally agree. I think that that 3 to 4 years, 4 years is a big deal in this league and what they're trying to do. And I think when you look at the guys that they've got as player coaches so far, like the Phil Mack and us with Hubert Bidens and Rook and Matty Truville, they're all great rugby players that one day are going to be great coaches. And you know, not every great rugby player becomes a great coach. So that's the other thing about bringing a guy into a culture that doesn't quite understand, you know, and you think, well, bring him in because I can give him a bit more money because he's a coach. He might be the worst coach in the world. He might be able to do it, but he might not be able to coach it. So with the 4 guys they got, I got no doubt that down the road they're going to be long-time coaches. So I'm happy with those guys. But if all of a sudden somebody, you know, brings in some Super Rugby Aussie or Kiwi or South African guy and just pays him more money to be a coach, and it doesn't work out, then that's when I think the league starts to take a hit, in my opinion. So
awesome. So, I think we're getting there. So, as far as player selection, do you think that MLR is going to be the choice destination for all players coming out of college? Year 2 or 3, 4, because I mean, what I'm seeing is, you know, like we talked about, 2 teams that were full of Eagles. One was the aggregate score. One is extremely dominant over the other.
Sure.
And I'm looking at guys, you know, Ben Sema, who's, because University of Maryland isn't, you know, their men's rugby club isn't, you know, the best. He's playing, you know, Rocky Gorge D1, going to the national playoffs. Like, that's the highest level of rugby he has locally. So that's what he's doing.
Sure.
And, you know, that's what's gotten him to be, you know, an Eagles pool player, multiple starts at fullback.
Yeah.
Do you see that the league, because he's going to graduate this year?
Yeah.
That's the guy I pick in the back of my head, that if he's not playing in Europe, and what I'm seeing you guys, the league produced so far, says like a guy like that needs to be a fullback on an MLR team in 2019.
100%. No, I agree. I totally agree with that. And I think that I think it's going to take a couple of years, like you said, to get to that point where the wages are sustained, where everyone feels really good about where this league's going. There's none of that. We did 1 year and we're done. We did 2 years, we're done. You know, so I think that eventually, like you see in Super Rugby, like you see in the Premiership, if you want to play for the Eagles, you have to play in the professional league. You can't just say, I'm going to play for the Eagles and live in Detroit anymore or Minneapolis anymore, unless they've got a team. But you've got to go, and these guys sacrifice a lot to be part of the Eagles. Like the guys that are local, they give up so much to be part of the Eagles that, given their opportunity to get paid outside of their trips with the Eagles, even as much as a AAA baseballer or a double A, whatever it is, double A baseballer, then that's going to make them better players and it's going to make the Eagles better. If you just have what they have now with everybody just scattered across the country and playing for random teams, then I think you're just going to end up getting the same result. So I think that in the next couple of years, there definitely is going to be a big push for all those guys that are local that want to play for the Eagles, moving to these teams. And then out of the college teams, either some sort of draft system or something that gets those top guys into MLR franchises straight out of school. So they don't have any worries about, you know, put their life on hold for a couple of years. They don't have to go find a job yet, you know.
Awesome. What was it? Looking at, there was a lot of discussions. I had this discussion on with Richard Osborne and Thierry Dupont on my Texas trip about a player draft. And I said to them that I didn't think for a while
Right.
that when, and I'm talking, you know, if you decide to have a player draft in year 2 or year 3,
Yeah.
I don't think the talent, like amateur player draft straight out of college that didn't go through an academy system,
Sure.
like Glendale or Saracens or Houston, and I know you guys are about to embark on that adventure shortly as well.
Yep.
But collegiate players, the talent overall can't sustain like a deep draft. So I'm thinking, if there's 10 teams, it's only 2 rounds.
Right.
Because, I mean, there's only minus like 20. So there's only about 80,000 people playing rugby from the age of 5 to, like 60.
Yeah.
There's only and in that group, there's only about 30,000 playing collegiate rugby, and there's only so many spots to play on an MLR team. So, just the amount of like dynamic and elite athletes that I look at and see in collegiate rugby, there's not a lot. And, I'm very critical of some of the ideas in collegiate rugby currently because, yes, it's not an NCAA sport, but what does USA Rugby and what do the colleges want out of their system? Do they want to produce high-performance athletes? And so, like you guys, I mean, locally, I think LSUA lost a bunch of funding from from Student Life or whoever was pushing funding behind that team. And what hurts me is when people refer to collegiate teams as varsity sports, but they don't receive, other than like Cal, Lindenwood, St. Mary's, they don't receive, NCAA level support. Right. So I would love for teams to just call themselves high performance clubs and say, hey, this is, if you want to play first or second side, you have to commit the time. And if you can't commit the time, you play third side at the collegiate level. And that's what it is, because a varsity sport in my eyes, which is NCAA, when it loses funding, it either gets rescued by alumni or it goes away. Like that's a varsity sport.
Sure.
Whereas, clubs sort of can quasi exist because they're not run out for the most part out of an athletic budget.
Right. I think one of the things that I think I've thought for a long time is that everyone talks about it, everyone wants, and USA Rugby is really pushing hard to get kids starting young, so 5, 6, 7, and playing through high school and playing through college and then into men's club rugby. Great idea. It is. Like you need to get that. But without an outlet, without something that drives that, like a professional league, I don't think that they're going to get the amount of people doing it as they should. And when I say that, I think that, if you go more top down rather than bottom up, I think it can work a little better. If MLR is really, really good in the 3rd and 4th year, you're going to have more kids wanting to play rugby. You're going to have more kids that have, you want people to have posters of Sebastian Kilm on their wall. You want kids to come out to games and meet the players, and you want the players to go to schools and get that buzz going that way, rather than just say, hey, here's a little bit bigger ball than a football ball, and it's a little bit different game. You should try it. It's fun. If kids don't have, take a kid who has all the ability in the world as a rugby player at high school and football. 9 times out of 10, they pick football because they've still got that NFL dream. They've still got that pool of scholarships. They've got all those things. So they go away from rugby, where if there's something for them to shoot for, even if 3 out of 10 pick rugby path, that's 3 great rugby players that we got back in that path. You know what I mean? And that's where I think USA Rugby has kind of got a little backwards. And I mean, I grew up in a country where it was already a big deal anyway. Like I started playing when I was 5, but it was already a big deal. But I also know that when I was 5, running around on the front lawn with my brother, I was pretending to be these rugby players that I watched on TV. I wasn't pretending to be myself, because if I didn't know what rugby was, or I didn't have anything to aspire to, it wouldn't drive me to to do it for a long period of time, in a sense, if that makes sense. And I think that's where I think a draft can come in, because I think that participation should rise based on the fact that this is, you know, going to be out there for people to watch and people to see and say, hey, like America's got this great professional rugby league. What is this game? They watch it and then they're like, hey, I want to play that game. Or parents say, hey, that looks like a great game for my kid to play. So I think that's my kind of theory on the whole thing, I guess. But
yeah. When people talk a lot about bottom up and what we need to do, and you know, like I've talked about, you know, transitioning players in their mid 30s to say, hey man, it's like you're losing it a little bit. You're still athletic. You're still fit. How about you come with me to the ref certification course this weekend? And, you know, because the pathway for, as the game grows, the pathway to become a high level ref is so much more open than it is to becoming a high level rugby player when you've been in the club game for 10 years. Like at a certain point, it's like, hey man, you can still play, but you need to go get level 1 and level 2 coach certification and help coach the youth team and stuff like that. But the big thing for me, as far as top down stuff is, and you know, you don't see the effort being made, at least during the 10 years that Nigel was CEO. He wasn't really talking to high school athletic associations and whatnot. I think that's the biggest, the MLR being established, you know, where there's stability over 3-4 years and we know it's going to be around, is important, because that gives coaches, administrators, children aspirational goals. But that also like helps put pressure on, you know, high school athletic associations. And that's the thing for me that the union needs to work on like the most, getting the sport sanctioned in, say, 30 states. The 30, you know, all the southern states where the weather is mostly good and where most of the population is extremely important, because right now only Massachusetts has sanctioned in-school high school rugby.
Right.
Like they're the only state. And guess what? It snows in the winter in Massachusetts.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, if you could get, like, there's a ton of rugby going on in San Diego and Los Angeles that I actually didn't know about growing up, which is sort of sad, but it's much bigger now. Yeah. If you could get, I think, what was it? Lacrosse was first sanctioned as a high school sport in the San Diego section. So we don't have one whole state championship panel to go through. You have like section championships, which are the thing. Yeah. But they were the first ones to sanction lacrosse in the state. And now multiple sections sanction lacrosse. But rugby is just as big as lacrosse in San Diego. So if you could get San Diego section to sanction lacrosse, then you have stipends being issued for high school coaches and coaching positions and teaching positions being held for high school coaches so they can make a living, because being a walk-on coach is rough.
Right.
Like, because coaching is a full-time job.
It is.
So if you're going to coach in the school system, you kind of need a teaching job.
Yeah.
Just the way it is. So that's where I see the growth model needing to, like, Dan Payne's smart, and I know he's working on this stuff, and he's just got so much working on, but that's part of the plan that I think needs to be pursued most when it comes to growing the game, is getting high school sports associations to sanction the sport, because then you have, you know, paid opportunities for coaches.
Right.
Kids don't have to drive 30 minutes to go play with their club.
Right.
They can just show up in the spring and, you know, February, March, and start playing rugby.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I agree. And I think one of the things that we'll do, and one of the things that I want all of our players to do, and I want Metropolis as well most of the time, for most of the guys that can, is, and the NOLA guy Gold Guys have no excuse, is they're all going to get assigned a high school team or a college team, and they're going to be out there and they're going to be helping them and they're going to be showing them, and they're going to be building that rapport of what it is to be a rugby player, and try and build that, generate some excitement about that. And yeah, I agree with you. I think that if they could, rugby's big in a sense to people who play rugby or people who know rugby. Outside of that, people don't even know it exists. So there's got to be more out there to show that there is rugby, and there's a lot of rugby, and there's a lot of places where people can go play. And I think that's, again, on the back end of what I think MLR should be doing is pushing a lot of that out there, and having their players out there and running camps and running summer programs and doing all these things where people know that there is such thing as rugby. And that's when people start to catch on.
I mean, the community development that I've seen with the league so far, with Houston, seeing what Glendale has built, and then, up in Seattle, and then Utah being sort of a confluence of their premiership teams.
Yeah.
You're seeing tons of community, I would say, activism. So the players are getting out in the community, working with the clubs. And, my conversation with Richard Osborne was because one of the old boys from the Austin Blacks was named, I forget his name now. It's in a notebook across the way. So, but like rookie rugby in Texas is being fully established this year, and all the Austin players will be going with, the rookie rugby staff and going into middle schools and teaching, middle schools and elementary schools and teaching kids to play rugby during PE.
Yeah, perfect. And we'll have something similar, and we're working on that as well. And I totally agree with that. That's definitely something that needs to happen from all the boys. They need to give back, and me as well as a coach. We need to give back to our community, and if we want our community to support us, then we need to give back to our community.
I'm seeing that with your phase 1 stadium project. Basically, when I heard about that, and then every person I shared that with, they were like, right on, because that's awesome. So, for the beginning, small size ground that also services, a high school that probably had to be a vagabond when it came to playing their home football games for the entirety of its existence, will now have, a World Rugby certified pitch that they can also play football on in the fall. So they'll have the facility to also play rugby, which I understand. And you guys have a high school program run out of New Orleans Rugby Football Club. So I think that's awesome. You're like, the investment into the community is already there.
Yeah.
And you just move forward.
Yeah. I mean, our facilities that they got set up down there for the boys are world class. Like the training, they've redone their pitch down there so that it's completely redone and resodded, and everything's nice and perfect. They've got all the locker rooms put up. They've closed down the clubhouse now, the old clubhouse, and they've knocked out the bottom level and made it into a training facility with like ice bars and hot tubs and training tables and physical therapy. And then upstairs, they've got meeting rooms and, projections and offices and player lounges, all that stuff is. And then they've got the stadium down the road a little bit, and the gym just across the road from the clubhouse. So, I mean, in terms of what the players are going to get by coming down to NOLA is world class. Like the facilities are great. And I think that, it's that proof of concept stuff. If we can prove in the first or second year that we can really do it, and we can sell it out, and we can put a product on the field that people really want to watch, then, sky's the limit of things that we can get done and accomplish down there. And the school where the stadium is, and all the old like dorm rooms and everything, it's beautiful. It's like an old French building place surrounded by trees, and it's pretty cool. And I think that and out the front we'll have a lot of fan stuff, activation stuff, and it's going to be like a carnival every home game, and it's going to be exciting. And then it's up to us to put a product on the field that people want to come and see. So
I think I hit everything. So what
right.
I mean, thank you for giving me almost an hour and a half.
Hey, you good, mate? No worries. I can talk about this stuff all day. I love it.
So yeah, so can I. I just needed to write down more questions, but I think as far as build up, here's a good one.
Sure.
So I think you guys have signed 2 Metropolis dudes.
We have.
How many? Can you give me a number? Who else is? How many more are coming? How many more?
Fitzy said, "Don't mention players' names." So I guess I can tell you numbers, but we're pretty close to having our squad all sorted out. In the next couple of weeks, there's going to be some announcements of some players that I think that are going to get everyone excited again. The quality of player that we're getting down there is definitely very, very high class and great rugby players, great guys. Metropolis, there will be, what did you say? We announced 2.
Yeah.
There'll be 3 or 4 more coming.
Okay. I mean, that's not pillaging. So.
Yeah, and it wasn't that Metropolis is a great club, and they are, and it's one of those things that it's not that I'm taking these guys away from Metropolis, and Metropolis doesn't think that either. That these guys deserve their opportunity and they deserve their crack. And I mean, Jojo and Pex are outstanding rugby players. They can turn a game on its head, and they love the way that the style of rugby I play. They love everything about it, and so. Yeah, they were jumping out of their skins to get down there and continue on and try and help us build this thing. So,
yeah, I really I mean, I understand that a lot of clubs over time are gonna lose players. I get that, yeah. But I think one thing we sort of saw with the last league, and that was just the way it was done, but still, the opportunity to get paid a relatively significant sum in rugby in this country is very fleeting.
It is.
Every club should be about further development of their players. Because if they have a good culture, when that player retires, they're gonna come back, or they're gonna come back and hang out on vacation and all that stuff. If the league, moves forward and becomes what I think the people behind it want, which is to eventually be the best league in the world.
Yep.
And I think there's definitely that possibility.
For sure.
Because based on what you see in wages, it's not, football or soccer money that you're competing with.
No.
So if over time you have a stable league, I mean, in year 4, I think you can pay more than some of these basically Division II leagues overseas are paying.
Yeah.
And, approach, unless things skyrocket, approach those salary caps, within 10 or 15 years.
Right.
And, there, because, the coaching staffs that I've seen so far, yours included, I'm very pleased, because there was a question is like, would you want MLR to just bring in American, it was US born coaches, not domestically available.
Sure.
Because domestically available, I think for 7 teams, I think you can build at least 3 of them. If you plucked people from every team, probably build high-quality coaching staffs from the domestically available talent. Now, if they decided to leave their other job, because some of the best coaches have pretty good gigs.
Sure.
So,
and I agree. I think there's a difference between American-born and guys like me and Davey Williams, who have been here for 11 years of our lives and poured our heart and soul into building club rugby and rugby in the USA. Like, I'd consider myself an American coach. I'm Australian, but I consider myself an American coach. I think if anywhere that I'd want to be a professional coach, it's America, So I think that, yeah, there's definitely a difference. And I agree, teams are going to lose players, and most teams should be happy about that they got quality players that are going to go play a high level. And yeah, hopefully one day they come back, and hopefully they come back better players, and they come back even into coaching roles and stuff like that for their clubs. But like, I can even tell you that Metropolis is going to lose a couple other players to other teams. So it's not that I didn't want them. It's that, that sometimes there's different players and different things that go on, but there's going to be other Metropolis guys that end up on other teams as well. So when you've got a good team and you've got a good culture and everything like that, then you should be happy that, 6, 7, 8 of you guys are getting offered contracts to go play professional rugby. So that's a credit to the club, I think. So
yeah, that was I think GCU had a guy at Grand Canyon had a kid that was about to be a senior who, well, he finished the year with a knee injury, but they were sort of mad at the time because they had 2 players getting talked to by the MLR, and only one of those guys went.
Sure.
And how he got talked into it is like, well, a guy was a U20 All-American at one point. Was in the, I think, I've seen his U20 tape. No, it wasn't on the one that qualified for the JWC, but it was Kwasniewski, I think, is the guy.
Down at Glendale.
And, out at Glendale. And here's the thing is, like, one of the U20 coaches was on their staff, and based on the games I've seen him play, he looks healthy. So you only have so much time. And this is what, I talk about with, football players that decide to come out. I was like, well, where are you going to school? What if you're going to – and baseball players too is like, where are you going to school? What is that degree valued? Are you going to go high? If you're going to go, in baseball, like top 20 rounds, get out. Go play. If you're if you're a football player and you're going to get drafted in the top 3 rounds, go make your money, come back. Because one thing, and you saw it with the Wales law that is now in place that's going to restrict players from going. It's like, let players go make money. Anyways, don't keep them, because guess what? So Reese Webb or Dan Bigger or whoever, Sam Warburton wants to go to France. Guess what? That spot that he was holding down in Cardiff or at Dragons or, at Ospreys now allows a young guy to come through.
Yeah,
and it's sort of the same. It's sort of the same with college. It's like colleges and clubs should be happy that if they're, if they've got it, their system with recruiting and coaching set, those 18-year-olds that are looking to go play college and not go into an academy, and they see a bunch of your juniors getting signed, they're going to come and play for you. You now have a destination program.
For sure.
So that's my philosophy there.
Yeah, totally agree.
So I think we'll sign off. Everyone, thanks to Nate Osborne. Great coach, great guy, as you can tell based on this interview. And I don't know if I'll be on the show on Monday night, but look for the guys on Monday at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. Or, no, 8 p.m. Pacific. And then, we'll talk all the other things that happened in the MLR this week. And signing off.